So we start to say, Dimitri, yes, that this is Orchot Tzaddikim, the path, the ways of the righteous, and this book goes through many of the different attributes which are common to our personalities, usually in pairs of positive and negative. Right now we're in the one of joy. So far what we've seen, of course, is the main idea here is that in Judaism, joy is not measured by effervescent laughter and frivolous behavior, but rather we're talking about a serene type of inner peaceful joy. That's the type of joy that the Torah lends value to. Of course, there's always some value to a good joke in order to warm people up and get things going. And he even talks about how wine is also very good to kind of catalyze and stimulate joy. But a person has to be very careful, of course, particularly in general and certainly regarding drinking wine and things like that, not to lose control of oneself and act in an appropriate way. And in the first sections, we were talking about negative forms of joy, and then the use of the role of wine in joy. And now he's going to move into some of the positive manifestations of joy. So that's where this paragraph starts. In Midas HaSimcha, the attribute of joy, Tuluya mitzvahs aseh shiyatzdik kol me'erosav. The attribute of joy, or upon the attribute of joy, depends the mitzvah of justifying everything that happens to a person. Because there is a mitzvah to justify everything that happens as coming from God, and therefore, even if we perceive it to be bad or harmful, we have to understand that everything comes from Hashem, and therefore, ultimately, everything is good. And that's dependent upon this attribute of joy. Because a person who's always focusing on being upset and dissatisfied and displeased with his lot, then he'll never be able to actually ultimately accept the idea that everything happens for the best. On the contrary, a person can only accept that everything comes from the best if he's willing to maintain a state of joy despite all of the different trials and tribulations that he might have. And therefore he says here, but midas hasimcha tluya mitzvah saseh sheyatzdik kol me'arasav. Shenemar, as it says, v'yadato im levavecha. It says in a verse, for example, and you shall know in your heart, ki kasher yeyaser ish es beno, just as a man will reprimand and sometimes even punish his son, Hashem Elokecha miasreka. So God, your God, will chastise you. Miasreka. And the word musar comes from this word here. Liaser. Musar. To chastise. So a child might think, if my parents punishing me, my father doesn't love me. My father hates me. Otherwise he wouldn't do such a thing. A child who says that is only being childish, of course. Because if the child realized, would think, had the ability, was developed enough, mature enough, the child would say, you know what, this is happening to me because I deserve it. I really acted out of line. And my father's punishing me not because he hates me, not because he spites me, not because he wants me to hurt and cry, because he loves me and he wants to guide me on the right path. And he wouldn't have used these measures, these extreme measures, unless my father, who knows more than I do, deemed it necessary in order to bring me to a better place. In fact, if I think about it, my father told me once, 3, 5, 10 times in a gentle way, stop doing that, or please do that. And I didn't listen. So I think about it, all the messages were in place. If I had just listened, I could have spared myself this punishment. The mature child, right, will accept that and be willing to be corrected. Not view the punishment as an indication the father doesn't love him. So here too as well. If a person finds things that are difficult which happen to him, he's suffering trials and tribulations, this should be a sign to this person that this is coming from his father, God, not because God hates him, spites him, wants to punish him, enjoys his pain, but on the contrary, because God loves him and is concerned about him and wants to see him, I'm saying him, her, same thing, right? See him go in the right path. And if after a person does tshuva, he finds that his situation does not improve as it was initially, mitzvah sheyachsho b'libo, he's required to think in his heart, ki l'tovaso nehepach inyan l'ra, that for his own good things have changed. Maybe what he thought was good was really not good for him. And what he thinks what's bad for him is really what's good for him. For example, a person might be in a position of bounty and blessing, material wealth, thinking everything's fine, and he's using that money to do whatever he wants. The problem is that a lot of what he wants is wrong, and it's causing himself and other people harm. So it could very well be that God sees, at least temporarily, that it's better for this person to have less access to wealth, and therefore less of his desires will be fulfilled and attained, which means the world will be a better place, because his desires are misplaced. It'll be better for him and better for other people. Ki kodem she'asa adam tshuva, before a person does tshuva, haya HaKadosh Baruch Hu mishalem lo schar mitzvos she'asa kedei litardo me'olam haba. The author here gives an example, slightly different than what I suggested, which is that before he was chastised, it could be that he was getting the reward for his few mitzvot in this world in order to pay him for his mitzvahs here, in order to ultimately prevent him from receiving the reward of his mitzvahs in the world to come. Why would God do such a thing? So the Gemara answers, the Gemara discusses, there's such a thing as a tzaddik v'tovlo, tzaddik v'aralo, rasha v'tovlo, rasha v'aralo, a righteous person who has it good, a righteous person who has it bad, a wicked person who has it good, a wicked person who has it bad. In the Gemara discussion of the wicked person, why some have it good and some have it bad, right? The Gemara explores the possibility that you can have a bad person who receives the reward for the few good deeds that he does here in this world. And that's ultimately for the purpose of being able to give him full retribution for the majority of his bad deeds in the world to come. Why is God being spiteful? Why does God have to do it that way? The answer is God does not have to do it that way, and God is not being spiteful. That's part of God's justice. And the way it works is as follows. God says to a person, listen, you have free will. You can choose good and you can choose bad. Good results in reward. Bad results in punishment, retribution, corrective measures. Now, I'm interested in you choosing the good. You choose whatever you want. But I'm going to give you the good in the world which is most important to you. It's your decision. You have free will to choose between good and evil. Yeah? I pay out the good in the world that's most important to you. That's where you'll get your good.
So it's not God deciding, it's a person deciding.
That's right.
Where he gets it.
Right. So a wicked person who doesn't think anything about the world to come, he only has this worldly of an orientation, puts this world to be the world of his primary interest. So God says, okay, if this is your main world, this is where you get your reward. You helped an old lady cross the street, right? You helped her take her groceries up to her apartment. You might have done other nice deeds. That all deserves reward. I'm going to give it to you in the world that you've chosen as your main arena of interest. That's this world. The result is that there's not going to be anything left for him in the world to come in terms of paying his reward. There, he's going to have to reckon with the retribution for his misdeeds. Okay?
Does this kind of lend itself to having a mentality where you're going to be afraid of any good thing that comes your way?
Excellent.
And there are people like that who, they'll come into some money, they'll, find a wallet on the street and be scared almost as if they're losing out on something grander down the road.
Excellent. Yeah, the Gemara says elsewhere, not in the Gemara that I was quoting earlier, but elsewhere, the Gemara says if a person sees that life is going too easily, it might be a sign that God's not happy with him.
Right.
And that's exactly why the author brings this teaching here. He says, if a person had it off good, and then has it worse, and after doing tshuva, it's still not like it was, he should consider that perhaps he was getting his reward for his mitzvahs in this world, and that's why things were going good for him. And now that he's done tshuva, God has changed his position. I've made my world, my primary world, the next world, so now God is accruing your reward and saving it for you there. But the result is that the punishments are going to be paid out for here. And then, therefore, he says, if a person's position was good, And then, I don't know, it says he did tshuva, and it's still not the greatest. It might be an indication that he actually has created this metamorphosis. He's transitioned his mitzvahs into the world to come, and his averis into this world.
So is it a bad thing when good things happen to you?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? The point is a person has to kind of figure out where he's holding, But if everything is going good, and he's not a particularly good person, and he knows that, that would be, this teaching would indicate that he's probably in the red in the world to come.
How about the good people who are doing well, who are well off?
So,
rich guy that supports Torah scholars.
Yes, a very righteous person who's also very wealthy. Probably, has something that doesn't quite go the way he would like, and he should have in mind when that happens that that's a kaparat avanot. It's like that suffering atones for one's transgressions. But that doesn't happen to most people. The Gemara says that most people are not zochit to, in the language of the Gemara, le'echol mishtei shulchanos, to eat from two tables, meaning the material. And so there were a few great exceptional individuals, and there always will be certain individuals who.
We'll be aware of them because they'll stick out.
You said that we will be aware?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Their names are on buildings.
Yeah. So if they're righteous and they're well, and they're well off, but that's usually, that's not particularly common. Now, the converse of everything that we're saying is that the Gemara there could also be understood in this light to explain why righteous people suffer. These righteous people suffer because they make the world to come their main world. So their good deeds are going to be repaid there. But there's nobody who's entirely perfect. Everybody has some transgression. Those transgressions are going to be reckoned with here. And this would be the explanation as to why wicked people prosper and righteous people suffer.
I think it's hard anytime you talk about why do bad things happen to good people when you think of more extreme cases. It's very hard to logically explain to somebody why they had some kind of tragedy or calamity befall them, and to say something like, well, you did something wrong, so therefore something really bad had to happen, I think is not ultimately fulfilling as an answer, at least because you're trying to feed an emotional stimuli with an intellectual or logical response.
This Gemara in Brachos that I was referring to earlier, which is talking about suffering, says that if suffering does come upon a person, then a person himself is required to be introspective and think about what they might have done or might not have done that might have been associated with this suffering. And if a person can't find anything that they would see as a cause that might attribute this suffering to, then the person should reckon it as what's called isurim shel ava, sufferings of love, which is just about God's kind of trying a person, even if they don't deserve to suffer because of any misdeed, but in order to help the person, to purify the person, similar to the way in which, not to purify in terms of sin, because we're talking about a case where the person doesn't have sin that would justify this type of suffering, but to elevate a person.
Like a child that has a disease or illness, or somebody that dies at a young age. It's hard to say that a newborn has like a sin that has to be expiated by having them have some kind of.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But you can also have a scenario where an adult is suffering for one reason or the other, suffering, and the person's trying to think whether there's, they might have done or not have done something that would be the cause of this, and the answer is no, I can't come up with anything. So the answer to the Gemara is, in such a case, it could be that's what we call isurim shel ava, where God is doing this simply to uplift a person, even if the person is not, it hasn't done anything wrong. I started to compare it to the analogy of burning, melting metal, like gold or silver, in order to separate the pure metal from the dross. I don't know if that's the best example, because as an analogy, the dross might imply that there's some imperfection or some transgression. But if we were to use that analogy, the impurity of the dross would be not the imperfection of sin, but just human weakness. And this experience is making the person stronger, like a crucible, purifying the person. So that's also a possibility. But it's true, it's wrong, and often can be actually callous. While a person's suffering, say, that happened to you because.
Well, it's not our place to tell somebody else
Right.
why they had to go through some kind of
Right.
because we don't know.
Right. But if you're talking about trying to console a person for his suffering and suggesting that it might be because of some shortcoming or misdeed, and that not being a satisfactory explanation for a person, particularly when talking about extreme suffering, that's all true. On the other hand, if you are aware of that possibility, then a person should be sensitive not to say it at the wrong time in the wrong way to the wrong person. A person should be sensitive to say it at the right time in the right way to the right person. But there's an interesting story in the Gemara where a certain rabbi, an Amora in the Talmud, whose the assumption is a righteous, holy man, had something very unfortunate happen to him. He had 400 barrels of wine go off and turn into vinegar. They went off. That represents a big loss. Barrels of wine are very big. I don't know how big they were in those days. Nowadays, in the wine industry, a barrel of wine is like 200 cases, where each bottle has each case has 12 bottles. I mean, you're talking about a lot of wine. In any case, it was considered, certainly in the context of the Gemara, to be a lot of wine. All of this wine went off and became vinegar. So the Gemara discusses how certain of his rabbi colleagues came and tried to console him. And they entered into this discussion with him, and at some point, he says to his colleagues, why did this happen? And they said to him, well, can you think of any reason why it might have happened? And they said, why? Do you suspect me of anything? So they said, well, do you suspect God of doing anything unjust? So he realized through this indirect route that they're actually trying to give him, reprimand him. And it turns out that they led the discussion to his recognition that he actually had land, and he was subletting this land to a laborer, and it was on condition that he pay for the land through a certain amount of the produce. There's probably a word for that in English. I don't know what it is. Sharecropper, okay. Hakira in Hebrew. So he was a sharecropper. And it became known to the rabbi that the sharecropper was withholding from the rabbi his part of the produce. He was saying he was only making 100 bushels when he was really making 200, and therefore giving the proper percentage but the wrong amount. And when the rabbi became aware of this, he withheld certain part of his wages against the amount of food that he was hiding from him. So the rabbi said to him, just because he steals from you, you have a right to steal from him? And it turns out that their claim to him was, if you have a claim against him, you should take him to Beis Din, but it's not right for you in this scenario to take the law in your own hands. The Gemara discusses elsewhere whether a person is allowed, under certain circumstances, to take the law into his own hands. And the answer in the Gemara is yes, there are certain specific situations where a person can take the law into his own hands. The basic criteria that have to be met is, number one, he has no recourse to the Beis Din for whatever reason. And number two, there's immediate loss which can't be recovered. So if there's going to be immediate loss which can never be replaced, and he has no recourse to Beis Din, he's allowed to take the law into his own hands. But generally speaking, you're not allowed to do that. And here the rabbi could have gone through the official channels, and he didn't. And he was criticized by his colleagues for doing this. And when they pointed out the wrong that he was doing, he did tshuva. And the Gemara there says that a miracle happened. And there are two versions of what miracle occurred. You familiar with the Gemara? Yeah. According to one version of the Gemara, the vinegar, which was wine that went off, miraculously turned back to wine, so that he didn't end up losing. According to another version, what happened was that the price of vinegar went up to the price of wine, even though it was normally much cheaper. Something happened in the marketplace so that the price went up, and he ended up losing. So here would be an example of course, it was a big monetary loss. It's not as extreme as, God forbid, the loss of life and the types of things you're explaining. But in this scenario of significant loss, a person is required to try and, if you can, lead the person into considering the possibility that something they did might be the cause for this, particularly if you have specific knowledge about what that might be. On the contrary, it would be mean not to tell that person. It might be appropriate to withhold it from him at a certain time until you find an appropriate time and circumstance to tell him, but not to tell him at all would be mean, because he has the possibility of correcting it, and you're preventing him from doing that. So this then would be the idea here as well, that God's causing this rabbi's wine to go off is a form of musar. He was punishing the rabbi not so much to punish him, but to set off the red light, that he should be aware that he's done something wrong that needs correcting. In the middle of the paragraph, Ki kodem shasa adam tshuva, before he did tshuva, haya kadosh baruch hu meshalem lo sechar hamitzvos, God perhaps was paying him the reward for his mitzvahs she'asa, that he did, kedei l'tardom l'olam haba, in order to bring him down in the world to come. How do we know this is the case? It says, "Umeshalem lesoinav al panov lahavido." God pays those who hate him by transgressing against him in their face, meaning now, this world, their main interest, lahavido, and the result is going to be that they're going to be lost in the world to come because all of their reward is being paid for here, and therefore he says, if a person's situation got worse and did not get better, it actually might be an indication that he's finding more favor in God's eyes because his reward is being preserved for him. And just like God does this to those who hate him, so also he pays the ones he loves, the punishment for the transgressions that they did in this world. Why? So that they'll be able to receive the full measure of their reward in the world to come. All of this is dependent on the attribute of simcha. Right? A person who is happy with the portion that Hashem gave him, so that if things aren't going so well, he should consider, you know what, I'm willing to suffer this, I'm happy about it. It's an indication either one, that my rewards are being preserved for me there, or that my punishments are being taken care of here, so they get the full reward there. On page Ayin Aleph, last paragraph, the way in which a person can be happy with his portion, that he should be happy to receive that which he perceives to be evil, just as he's happy to receive the good. This approach can be subdivided into different venues. The first one is he has to work very strongly on developing trust in God. Trust. A child who agrees to let go of his parent while his parent's trying to teach him to walk does so because he has trust in the parent. Or a child who's willing to jump into the pool without being held by his parent is expressing trust in the parent. They're not going to let me fall on my face. They're not going to let me drown. And so too, when a person starts to kind of approach this idea of accepting everything in life as being from Hashem, a first prerequisite is he's got to have trust in God, that everything that does is for the good, it really is for my betterment, and therefore I'm going to have trust. I'm going to trust, yeah.
Why does he use the word depends on Gadea?
Because it requires a certain degree of self-control. So there's a certain type of pearl. Because without that, a person is like, say, well, there is no God, or God doesn't care about me, and it requires a certain amount of. I think that's the idea. I was also wondering that. It's a good there. It's like a person has to strengthen, bolster himself. It's like, as we would say in English, you have to bolster your faith and trust in God. Strengthen yourself. Hasheni, the second one, Hemuna. Not just trust, but belief. What's the difference? What's the difference between Emunah and Bitachon?
Trust is there for future. And Emunah is for now.
Okay,
What's going on now is
very interesting. Why do you say it that way? Have you seen that anywhere or heard that?
Yeah, I've heard it a few times.
Yeah, very interesting. So you're suggesting that what? That Bitachon is in the present, in the future. Future. And Emunah is in the present.
What's happening now is for the best.
Uh-huh. And not only is it now for the best, ultimately what will also be for the best. Hashlishi, the third one, hasechel. A person needs to have sechel. What's sechel? He has to be thinking. A thinking person. Haravi, haistapkus. It's being satisfied. Being satisfied. That doesn't mean to say feeling satisfied, but being satisfied. Even if your needs aren't fulfilled, it's still having the feeling of being satisfied. So these are the four characteristics that a person needs. Bitachon, Emunah, Sechel, and Istapkus. He's going to go through all four of them, yeah?
I think the way I see it, maybe,
Yeah?
this fence that you trust God is something external to the person himself. And Emunah is something internal.
Okay, why would that be?
Because otherwise I don't see the great difference between Emunah and Bitachon. If you say that it needs a big fence, something that suggests to me something external, something that is provided by outside, by other people.
Yes, but a person can also be his own source of bitachon, just like he can build his own fence.
Yeah, but then I ask myself, what's the difference between Emunah and Bitachon?
So Emmanuel suggested one difference. Maybe we'll see as we go along more. But another difference between bitachon and emunah is that bitachon is trust in God, but emunah is belief, which is the things that you know about God or that you believe about God. So part of what you believe about God is that He does everything for good. But it also includes things like God is all-knowing, God sees everything, God knows what I've done, what I do, what I will do. God is the creator. I mean, all of the tenets of belief.
But wouldn't you say that Bitachon is a direct result of all the things that you're saying now about
Yes,
Emunah?
yes. Yeah, that's right. That would seem that, yes. And if that's the case, then maybe it shouldn't be first. Maybe he should have written emunah first and then bitachon. You have to strengthen yourself in emunah, which is your comprehension of God, and then use what you know about God to extend to the realm of trust. Because there are two different things. You can believe in God and not necessarily trust in God. But if you do trust in God, that implies that you also believe in God. So the order, that would raise the question, why does he put in the order that it does? Amar HaChacham, it was said by the wise one, Kol Adam tzarich goder v'sa'ad v'semech kedei shiskaimu ma'asav v'tovim. Every person needs a fence, needs some sa'ad, support, or sa'ad, help, semech, support, kedei shiskaimu ma'asav v'tovim, so that his good deeds should be established and continual. Mahu goder, what is the fence? Zeu bitachon. This is trust. Sheboteach tomid be'elokim yisbarach. He's constantly trusting. He always trusts in God. K'moshe Ne'emar, as it says, Hashlech al Hashem yehavecha. Throw upon Hashem your burden. V'hu yichalkelecha, and He will sustain you. Umahu geder habitachon. What is this fence of trust? Ve'eze davar mevi sheyiftach ha'adam be'elokim. And what will bring a person to have this trust in God? Zoe emunah. This is the emunah.
It's like what you said, like the Emunah, like what you said.
Yeah.
The Emunah should be first.
Yeah. According to this, you'd think that he would have listed emunah first. So why did he list trust first? Because in terms of dealing with the suffering, what's the immediate remedy is trust. How do you get to that trust? Emunah. So that's maybe that's why he said trust first. But according to the way it spells it out here, it's true that yes, trust is really a function of emunah. They're two different things. Emunah is what you believe. Trust is what you do about that belief. You don't necessarily translate emunah into practical behavior. That's where trust comes in. How do you get to trust? Through emunah. Zoe emunah. Mitoch shemamin babore. Insofar as he believes in the Creator, shekol hatzlachaso ba'olam hazeh u'ba'olam haba, that all of his success in this world and the world to come, mimenu, it comes from God. Ve'ein acher zelaso, and there's nothing other than Him. Noisen libo le'avoso b'chol levavo. Then he'll put his heart to loving Him with God, with all of his heart. So when he strengthens himself with the belief that God rules everything, and God has everything to do with what seems to be my success and what seems to be my failure, then I realize that I should love God for His very intimate interest in me, and also have faith and trust in Him that whatever happens is for my good. And there are certain things where a person thinks that he fails, he did not succeed, when in truth that was his success. If he had accomplished what it is that he thought would be success, he ultimately might very well have been a failure, or that might have only been a limited success. We all know of situations where a person, right, the worst possible outcome happened, and it turns out actually to have been the best possible outcome in retrospect. We're running a little short in time. We have this long paragraph, but I'm still going to try and get through it, so I'll do it a little more quickly. Umahu geder amuna. So that was bitachon. And what is amuna? Veze davar mevi adam lidei amuna l'shlema. What brings a person to perfect faith? Hu shelo yisna'anei midavar ra. He will not be blown aside by evil. Shikabel kol ba'alav b'simcha. And he's willing to accept everything that happens to him, even if it seems bad, with joy. It's compared to a servant who knows that his master provides for him everything that he needs. And this master is also generous and giving and loving. And in this master's increasing the burden of his servants, he's actually heaping upon them goodness. Why? Through this, he elevates them. He gives them training and perfection and growth and so forth and so on. And he gives them honor. And then these servants will also be people who he confides in. And they eat from his table. And he causes them to ride around in his vehicle. And he puts them as overseers of his land. It's no doubt that a servant who knows this about his master, that such a servant will leave any other types of distractions in the world, and he will serve his master with joy, because he knows that no matter what work the master puts on the servants, however difficult it is, he knows that this master is loving and benevolent, and the extent to which he works hard for him, the master will repay him. Again, we don't do it for the reward. The point is, no matter how difficult it is, the servant nevertheless knows that the good-hearted master has only the good of the servant in mind. And even if the service is very difficult, when he thinks about the good that's going to result from this, but a servant who sees his master is always being niggardly with paying his servants, he knows his master is like is stingy. And he always causes people to work more than he actually pays them. Such a servant will only work for such a master through anguish and anger and with animosity. So too, a person who has complete faith in his Creator, that he does good and he is merciful more than any other, and he's a true judge, and everything he does for the good, and he gives great reward to people who suffer on account of his name. A person who will serve God under these circumstances with the right intention, the Shem Shemaim, not for the reward, but for the purpose of just the honor of serving the master, the benevolent master, this person will have it very good. Kinyan shematzinu b'Nebuchadnezzar, like we find by Nebuchadnezzar. Avur sheposa sholosh psios l'chavod hakel, he took 3 steps in honor of God. Zacha l'gedula gedola. The Gemara says God gave him great reward. As wicked and as nasty as he was, he ended up being the destroyer of the temple and so forth and so on. But he took these 3 steps in honor of God. God repaid him greatly. We find the same thing by Esav. Since he was very careful to honor his father Yitzchak, he had great material bounty in this world, and the same for his descendants. And we have many such examples of this. There's no doubt if a person accepts this wholeheartedly, he'll be happy with the judgments of God. Who would not be happy in a scenario where somebody takes from him a few pennies, but he gives him gold coins instead? So we might suffer a little bit in this world, but we know that ultimately it's going to result in a much greater result than our degree of suffering. So we sacrifice a little bit of suffering, knowing that ultimately God is merciful and will make it even much better for us. So this would all be in the realm of Emunah.